everybody, and welcome to City of the Future, our November series. Today is going to be an exciting day. We're going to be covering a whole host of topics, including IoT. We also have an ecosystems conversation coming up, and we have a really awesome fireside chat up next, tech-enabled recovery. It's been a really interesting year as we moved through the City of the Future series with everyone. Thank you so much for joining us as we've kind of switched up our platform, but we're very excited to be rounding out the year on a strong note. For those of you that are watching, please go ahead and drop your questions into the chat. We'll make sure that those get answered as we move forward. And a huge thank you to our team and to our sponsors for making this a possibility. With that, I will pass the torch over to Jason Rodriguez to kick off our first conversation. Jason.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you, Joyce. My name is Jason Rodriguez. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Z-Prime, and very excited to be kicking off this conversation about a tech-enabled recovery. As Joyce mentioned, lots of change and transformation happening across cities, utilities, and infrastructure. So there's a lot to dig in today. And today I have the privilege of being joined by Nadir Khan, who's Senior Director of IoT for AT&T. Nadir, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, sure. And just for our audience out there, either in joining us through Zoom or joining us on LinkedIn Live, please, we do encourage you to ask questions that you want to get to. Put them in the chat early. Our team will make sure that we get them and hopefully get them addressed. But Nadir, maybe a good start is maybe just tell us a little bit about your role there at AT&T and some of the things you'll be working on, and then we'll dive into some of the conversation.
Sure. So my role at AT&T, like you mentioned, I'm a senior director of our IoT team. My team is responsible for providing advanced data solutions, IoT solutions to all of our public sector customers, which is, our federal government customers, state, local education customers, port authorities around the country. We're focused on, my team is focused on helping, from a public sector perspective, provide the type of technology that a local government, a state government, a school district, or a federal government agency might need to be able to do their jobs better. So that's the role of my team, and I'm very privileged, not just because of my specific role at AT&T, but we're very privileged because we get to deal and solve some very real problems for our public sector customers, whether it's providing our public safety agencies with the connectivity that they need, no matter where they are, so that they can do their first responder jobs properly, utilizing our network, utilizing the FirstNet network, and then utilizing 5G technologies as well. So we get to do some pretty cool things with our public sector customers.
Well, fantastic. So I think just diving right in, there's a broad spectrum of issues facing utilities, cities, agencies across the United States. So I want to get your perspective on what do you see as some of those main pillars where tech can play a key role as part of the recovery.
Sure. So there's about 5 pillars from in my mind that are going to enable our recovery, and that is being able to provide and accelerate the connectivity offerings to citizens, to students, to public servants. That connectivity pillar is critical, and the evolution of that connectivity pillar using IoT platforms is the next step, right? Because we can't use 20th century billing platforms, support platforms to be able to provide connectivity when you've got thousands as a utility. For example, you've got tens of thousands of connected endpoints. So we've got to be able to provide connectivity for those endpoints, but then also provide IoT platforms that will help manage that connectivity. So that's one pillar of our tech-enabled recovery. I think sustainability is a second is a second pillar there that we absolutely have to be focused on as a public corporation, but also as a country, and then certainly as a world, right? Everybody's heard a lot about what went down at COP26 last week. Sustainability will continue to be an important piece of not just, from a sustainability perspective and making sure the world is taken care of, but also because there's a lot of opportunities associated with sustainability that we have to take advantage of. Because if we don't take advantage of that here in the United States, there are other countries lining up to be able to take advantage of some of those sustainability measures that will, from a technology perspective, really accelerate growth around the world. So sustainability is probably a second pillar. I'd say infrastructure improvements, right? So using technology to enable infrastructure of the future, right, is going to be a third pillar. The fourth pillar in my mind is absolutely being able to solve for the digital divide. Being able to, again, and this relates back to connectivity, right? I mean, students over the last couple of years now have been challenged with being able to learn from home, learn from places where they might not traditionally have had connectivity. Not everybody has Wi-Fi access or broadband at home. And being able to solve for that digital divide, not just for students, but also for workers and citizens, is also going to be a critical piece of a tech-enabled recovery. So if I think about it in those simple terms, I mean, each one of these pillars I could talk to you guys about for ad nauseum. But if I was to think about four pillars for, how technology is going to enable our recovery here, that will be it.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on that last one because this is something that's been touched on across the series, and we're hearing different stories and different projects of coming to life, and a lot of great groups really working together through the recovery, especially over the past 2 years. So in respect to the digital divide, can you maybe talk about some of the programs or technology solutions that AT&T is looking to deploy to help support, whether it's school systems, maybe it's disadvantaged communities? Can you maybe expand on that?
Certainly. So there is obviously the federal government is committed to this space. They've committed some hard dollars through the CARES Rescue Act, the American Rescue Act. There's money that's been put into the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was just passed, that is going to expand broadband access. And we're going to be very focused on being able to deliver that broadband access in rural areas, in areas where traditionally maybe it was not economically feasible to be able to provide connectivity because you just didn't have the population to be able to sustain and make it economically feasible. But with subsidies now that are going to be coming down, available to technology providers, operators like AT&T, Verizon, etc., we will be able to provide connectivity for people where previously we've not. And this is not just in rural areas, but think about tribal nations. Think about areas where geographically it's been very difficult to provide broadband access. So using technologies like low power wide area access networks, our FirstNet network, our 5G network rollout, as we turn down some of our older technologies like 3G services, for example, we're going to be able to put more and more bandwidth and utilize more and more spectrum to deploy wireless wide area networks where traditionally we might not have been able to, maybe put up Ethernet line in, for example, and it would have been expensive or it would have been too time consuming to do that. Now we can solve for some of that with wireless technologies, and I just mentioned a few of them here. There's a number of other ones out there in the marketplace as well that we're going to be able to bring to bear to provide connectivity in areas where previously we've not. Being able to, and it's not just about the network, it's also about the type of devices, right? So, and then securing those devices is critically important as we think about expanding access to students, for example. Providing the right type of device options for schools, libraries, to provide to their students so that they can take it home if they don't have broadband access at home, and then be able to secure that device so that it meets Child Information Protection Act requirements. Right, CIPA is an important law that was passed that protects children from predatory behavior online. So being able to take those devices and then secure them using the appropriate type of filters, so that our students not just have connectivity but have secure connectivity where and when they need it, is an important part of solving for that digital divide, especially for students. As I think about citizens and workers, employees around the country, I think about just my own team. I made it clear to my team that 100% of them, based upon their feedback, have said that they do not want to go back to the office 5 days a week. And I'm okay with that. And for some people, I don't. The balance is going to be different. Some of the folks on my team are going to go back to the office 2 or 3 days a week. Some of them will only go to the office once a week, maybe. And as long as I provide them with the tools to be able to get their job done from wherever they are, and again to be able to do it securely, then I'm absolutely okay with that. And if I take that snapshot out and build it out a little bit more, so 100% of my team is going to be virtual going forward. But when we did a survey of our employees overall at AT&T, and we employ over 200,000 people around the globe, over 50% of our employees said that they would prefer not to have to go back to an office space. And I think that's a trend that is we're going to see across the country, across all sorts of major corporations, across federal government agencies, state, local agencies as well. So being able to provide connectivity options for employees, citizens, students, so that they can live, work, and play wherever they want to be able to do that from, is going to be critical as we emerge out of COVID and into the year 2022.
Yeah, I completely agree. As you're touching on several, especially the digital divide aspect, and then you started with sustainability early on, and they're definitely interlinked. And you can't get sustainable if it's only a handful or portion of really the normal citizenry that can really take advantage of that. So in terms of sustainability, how will kind of helping democratize that access to information help cities make better sustainable decisions, like from some of the things you're seeing?
So, Jason, if you could ask that question, repeat that. You broke up. Maybe it was my connection on my end. If you could repeat the question, please.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's sorry about that. Might be in a tough spot, but just in terms of sustainability, just trying to get a sense of what are how you can see like better access to information through technology will help several, whether it's cities, schools, or municipalities, help better meet their sustainability goals.
Sure. So, sustainability is a critical pillar of our not just our technology not just recovery in this country, but around the world. And it's about making sure that our infrastructure that we have in our buildings, in our homes, in our schools becomes a lot smarter, right? So I was just with a large school district in Texas last week, and they have close to, across that district, I think 86 different buildings that they are responsible for and maintaining. And each one of these buildings have obviously an HVAC system in it that provides heating and cooling. But across all 86 buildings that they probably have close to 8 different HVAC systems. And being able to manage those HVAC systems is critical. Now, it's very expensive to replace HVAC systems, and we don't want our school districts to be able to have to do that. Our job is to be able to take the existing HVAC systems and make them smarter. So, for example, what does that mean? That means let's use IoT and artificial intelligence. Let's layer that on top of the data that we can get from your HVAC systems using a number of different endpoints that can then take a look at how that HVAC system, how that air conditioner is behaving, and if there's a certain critical break that might be happening, let's provide some preventive maintenance before that air conditioner actually breaks. So preventive maintenance and layering in artificial intelligence to be able to provide preventive maintenance is a key component to sustainability. Again, giving you the school district example, and then taking that a step further, let's then layer in. All school districts have bell timings, right? I mean, you've got some rooms that need to be utilized from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning, and then maybe there's nobody going to be in it from 10 to 1 o'clock, and then students filter back into that room at 1 o'clock for another bell. Let's use, again, IoT and AI tech to be able to turn the HVAC system or the air conditioning on to those rooms only when the schedule requires it to be turned on, right? And we're seeing the same technology being utilized, not just in school districts, we're seeing it being now leveraged at airports, in hospitals. So to a long answer to your question, but let's use IoT technology, let's use AI to deliver endpoints that can be incorporated into the existing infrastructure of a public building, for example, a school, a library, a hospital, and then let's make that building smarter so that we meet our sustainability goals.
Thank you. Fantastic use cases, fantastic examples. I really appreciate that. Turning to a question in the chat from Jeff here, based off your last point, Nadir. His question is, do you anticipate the long-term shift to remote work to be economically damaging to possible urban areas?
I don't believe so, Jason. I think, giving people, mobility is a key aspect to freedom. And by mobility, I don't necessarily mean cellular connectivity. Giving people the option to be mobile has always been a key economic indicator of success. So if a person has the ability to work anywhere they want to, from anywhere they want to, you are only going to exponentially increase the amount of economic opportunities. For example, I'll go back to the example I was giving of my team. I mean, if you have to go to work 5 days a week at an office, you might put up with a 1 hour commute, maybe an hour, 15, 20 minutes, right? If you want to do that. If you go back to work 5 days a week, if you go back to work 3 days a week, you might be willing to put up with a 2 hour commute. And if you have to go back to work and go to an office 1 day a week, now you might be up to, be able to put up with a 3 hour commute. So you think about that ring of opportunity that becomes available to people. You're expanding it out to the number of people that might be able to perform that task, to perform that job, and to be able to apply for that position. So I think you're giving people the option to work from wherever they want to will be a economic boom, not just for us here at AT&T, but around the country.
Thank you. We got a question in from the LinkedIn chat. So and it ties to that. So the question is, how do you, with so many fewer workers coming to the office, how do companies address much lower occupancy rates?
I think you're going to see a shift in how office spaces are used. Europe has already seen this shift. We've already seen this shift in Japan, where traditional office spaces have been turned into multi-unit housing, right? So we here at AT&T, we're not going to be making any decisions anytime soon. But if we respond to our employees, and if half of them say that they would prefer to work from home and not go back to an office, then obviously we're going to have to recalibrate the amount of office space that we need. We're not going to make a knee-jerk decision. That decision will be made over a period of time. There's always going to be critical workers that are going to need to be at a specific location to be able to perform their job function. But then there's going to be a number of workers that don't need to be. So maybe we repurpose those buildings to be able to provide potentially maybe an equipment room. Maybe we use it as a CO. Maybe we use those locations for purposes that we haven't even thought about yet. So that's my approach to it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, there's several other good questions coming in on that topic, but we do want to move on just to touch on some of the few of the other areas here. Quick, just a follow-up question on this. So going back to some of the technologies, which ones do you see really allowing some of these breakthroughs to happen that may have been as a result of some of the lessons learned or some of the new technologies deployed from COVID?
So what are the lessons learned from some of the new technologies that have been deployed because of COVID?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I walked into this building today, I'm at a conference. There was a thermal scanner that was right next to the door. I had to walk by it, and there was maybe about 10 other people that had walked ahead of me, and everybody was thermally scanned as we walked in, and our temperature was taken to make sure everybody was, nobody was sick. So I think thermal technology and video analytics is a critical technology component. We're seeing it being used also to be able to do things like make sure crowds are better managed. We're seeing that technology being used at airports. We actually have, there's a ski lift operator in Colorado that we're working with that used to be able to send out employees to be able to manage these ski lifts, and they would do it based upon phone calls that they would get from a specific ski lift saying, the line here is too big. Could you please send people, reroute them to another lift? That can take a while. So what they're now layering in there is they've put in some very basic cameras that are going to be able to count the number of people in a crowd as they queue up, and then they're going to be able to, based upon the number of people lining up in the queue, be able to reallocate resources to, say, other areas of their ski resort. So video technology, I think, is a critical component. Connectivity has been a big learner for us, right? Making sure that we don't just provide connectivity, but you provide connectivity at the speed that people need access to it with, right? So that's why our shift to 5G is going to be a critical component of our growth as a corporation at AT&T, and certainly for this country as well. And so 5G technologies, which essentially provides very high speed access, Ethernet speeds basically, very low latency, and then be able to provide massive connectivity. So previously 4G technologies, LTE technologies, where typically we would be able to sustain maybe 1,000 connections per square kilometer. With some of the 5G tech that we're rolling out in this country, you're going to be able to support 1 million connections per square kilometer. So that is a 100-fold increase in the number of connections that our network will be able to sustain. So I think connectivity, video technology, and AI are going to be a critical component to that. Some of the lessons learned from COVID, certainly.
Thank you. So with that, a good pivot there is there's lots of information, lots of data, lots of new ways to connect. So taking a step back, so what does that leave for this role of data governance in this more digitally connected communities for residents, for government agencies, for state officials, that their governance layer? How do you see that playing a role in this future where we're more connected?
Yeah, so cybersecurity is going to be a critical component for everything every corporation does, whether you're a small business, big business, or your government, or you're a private citizen, right? Cybersecurity is going to be extremely important for us. Just like you look after your health, you take your vitamins, you do your exercise, I think you've also got to be able to look out for your cybersecurity as an individual, but then also as a business owner, as a public corporation, and certainly as a government. With some of the new infrastructure spending that's been announced, I think $400 billion is going to be allocated towards cybersecurity, right? So everybody heard about, the SolarWinds disaster last year and some of the other data breaches that we hear about. So data and cybersecurity is going to be a critical component of as we make this evolution to, a remote workforce, remote students. I talked about HIPAA compliance and the Child Information Protection Act, being able to provide filters so that students are protected when they're studying from home. That just goes towards that whole cybersecurity message. The federal government here in the United States has done a really good job of putting down some standards. That's known as FedRAMP, right? So a lot of the things that the federal government now rolls out in terms of technology has to be FedRAMP certified, which makes sure that there's no technology that comes in that might be a foreign power trying to take advantage of potential loopholes, right? So cybersecurity is going to be critical. So if you're a CIO, you're a business owner, you're a parent, at home, being able to incorporate what that security means and come up with the best decisions for your business, for your family, for your corporation is going to be critical. And also we want to make sure that as we roll out more technologies, more endpoints, whether it's video cameras or whether it's endpoints that look at sound, air pollution, things like that, all of these data endpoints, if they're gathering data, let's make sure that the data is anonymized. So let's make sure that it's not user-specific data, but anonymized data that's based upon MAC addresses, for example, that cannot be tied to a specific individual. So I think when it comes to data governance, making sure that when we're gathering data, that data is as anonymous as possible, and then making sure that when we roll out, as we think about our future, for our, like I said, for the family, for a business, for a corporation, that cybersecurity becomes an absolutely integral part of that decision-making process.
Thank you. And just to follow up there, what are some tips you might have for public agencies to how they can better maybe communicate some of those safety measures in place when it comes to cybersecurity of how citizen data is being protected? Like, what are some recommendations we should be thinking about so that citizens feel comfortable in basically using some of these new technologies?
I think the key there is you've got to be as open as possible with your citizens about anything that you're rolling out. So if you're a Department of Transportation and you're rolling out video cameras along traffic intersections to make sure that your traffic intersections are safer, to prevent accidents, for example. And as you roll out technology that's going to enable things like the connected car, that you are as open as possible with your citizens about what that technology is and how that data is going to be used. I think we've got certain rights and privileges in this country that we have to be very aware of, and being as open and transparent as possible with our citizens, with our students, with our families about the decisions we make is the sort of the foundation of the right type of decisions to make.
Thank you. So we only have about 5 minutes left. So if there's any questions here, please submit them in there. We'd love to try to get to them. But Nadir, I just wanted to ask, talked about a lot of great things, but is there any cities or projects that really shine through in terms of like creativity, how you use emerging technology to better serve residents? I know you guys are working across the nation on several innovative projects, but I just wanted to see if you wanted to share anything particular.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll say that the city of San Antonio, for example, is doing some very innovative things. They've got a technology corridor in place, and they've taken the city of San Antonio, the leadership at the city, as well as the leadership over at CPS, which is the utility for the city of San Antonio, is doing some very innovative things. So, for example, taking a look at all of the lighting infrastructure within the city and looking to make that smarter so that your tax dollars are spent as best as possible, so that we're using lighting when required, and not just on all the time, for example. So making our lights a lot more adaptive, using IoT and artificial intelligence, layering that into the lighting infrastructure, for example, in the city of San Antonio, that's going to be a critical piece of the sustainable future that San Antonio is building. Also doing things like looking at technology to make parking a lot easier for residents. It can be very frustrating in a big city to be able to find a parking spot, right? And being able to get to the, you don't want to spend 20, 25 minutes looking for a parking spot. You're wasting gas, you're wasting time, you're wasting money. So the city is, again, looking at some very innovative technologies to be able to make parking access a lot easier to find for its citizens. So I'm sure there's going to be more news coming out of the city of San Antonio here over the next few weeks and months about how they roll that technology out. But that's certainly an example that comes to mind. We've got college campuses that are doing things with dumpsters. So, where you've got a college campus that might have 400 or 500 dumpsters all around a campus location. Previously, they might have trucks going out and just picking up those dumpsters on a specifically preset schedule. Whether that dumpster is full or not, they didn't know. Now, with some very low-cost infrastructure, we can put sensors in all of these trash cans, and then only when it's 3/4 full does a truck need to go pick it up. We found that we're doing a test with a university campus. They reduced the amount of cycle times, the amount of truck rolls they had to do by close to 60%. So think about that. Think about reducing the amount of time, money, fuel by 60%. For your fleet. I mean, those are remarkable numbers. Some other, we're working with some airports in the federal space where we're looking to identify foreign objects on runways, so that if there's a rock or a pebble on a runway, we use, again, 5G tech along with IoT and artificial intelligence to make sure that we alert the runway authorities ahead of time that there might be an object there that needs to be cleaned up before the next plane comes into land. Think about what that does for passenger safety down the road. So those are just 2 or 3 things that come to mind that we're working on right now. But we're seeing this move towards a smarter city accelerate.
Thank you. Great example. So we're up on time, but Nadir, I'd love for you to end on, there's a lot of major challenges out there for communities to tackle. You get to see a lot of it, you get to see other technologies, but what is that one thing that makes you hopeful that we are going to go big and do big things in the future?
The biggest thing, I think, is democratizing access. Access to work, access to healthcare, access to curriculum, and being able to provide that access anywhere people might need it. That is what gives me hope for the future. When we built roads across this country and connected cities and towns, it had an exponential increase in how far this country developed since the 1950s. Then we put in telecommunication infrastructure that democratized access to, where things needed to be that much more. And then wireless technology came around, cellular technology came around, which provided 3G access, so you can have access to the internet basically on your phone, email on your phone. And now the next evolution in technology with 5G will allow you to do things like get healthcare access from wherever you are. Be able to study and work on complex things from wherever you are. That is really what gives me hope for the future, not just here in this country, but around the world.
Well, great point to end on. Thank you so much for your time today, Nadir. It's been a great conversation. Thank you all for joining. And now to continue our great session today, I get to hand it off back to my good friend and colleague, Joyce Dooley, who has an amazing panel. Joyce, over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
so
Jason.
much. Thank you, Nadir. It was such a treat. We've definitely learned a lot from that first fireside chat, so thank you so much. We're going to be talking about innovation ecosystems today, guys. So leaders need to rely on several different talent pools and partnerships in order to create truly resilient communities. And by tapping into utilities and entrepreneurial centers, cities can source diverse solutions and that are effective and community driven. Joining us today, we've got Andy Littlejohn, Epicenter's Chief of the Incubator and Accelerator. We have Richard Medina, CPS Energy's VP of Grid Transformation and Engineering. And then we also have Matt Reet, who is the, the City of San Antonio's Office of Innovation Administration. That's a lot of innovations in the title, for sure. But thank you everybody for joining us today. Before we get too far into it, I would really like each of you to kind of describe the projects that you're working on, because you each kind of touch on your own unique aspect of, the innovation ecosystems here in San Antonio. Andy, would you kick us off?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Joyce. And hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today. As Joyce mentioned, my name is Andy Littlejohn, and I'm the Chief of the Epicenter Energy Incubator and Accelerator. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Epicenter, we are a nonprofit organization based in San Antonio. We were founded in part by CPS Energy and 3 of their vendor partners, including Itron, Landis & Gear, and OCI Solar Power. And our mission is to help advance energy innovation and energy thought leadership. And so we primarily manifest that through 3 different program areas that we run. One is our energy think tank, where we bring some of the thought leaders and trends that we're seeing in the energy sector, and we expose them to broader audiences. But then we also have our advisory services work, where we actually will contract with large established energy companies like a utility, and will help them to manage their innovation pipeline. So we kind of essentially help them vet some of the new and emerging technologies that they're seeing, and determine if they want to do some sort of pilot or limited deployment. And then finally, we also work in the incubation space, which is where I spend most of my time. And so we run incubator and accelerator programs where we work directly with energy startups and energy innovators and provide them commercialization support so that they can bring their products and services to market faster. So we kind of have our hands in all 3 of those different pots.
Great, thank you so much. And Richard, would love to hear more about your projects.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Richard Medina. I'm the Vice President of our Grid Transformation and Engineering here at CPS Energy. So a couple of the projects, we have innovation comes at us in all directions, and there's all different types of new products and services that are out there. So some of the big ones that we're looking at is really, we have a distribution solar and battery storage project where we have 5 megawatts of solar panels along with a 10 megawatt battery where we can do solar shifting and store that energy and move it during peak times. We're doing jointly with the city, we're doing a smart city streetlight project where we're looking at putting controls on streetlights. We have over about 130,000 streetlights that we manage out there. And so putting controls on those gives us the ability to do analytics on the streetlights to make sure they're all working. But the value is it also provides that canopy network so that we can overlay other sensors for the city or for any other of our partners. So they're looking at air sensors, temperature sensors, noise sensors, parking sensors, and we can overlay all kinds of new sensors that come out. So that we're excited about that. We're also doing pilots around EVs. EVs are here. I think we've been seeing on the news, GM and Ford are announcing that they're going all electric in the next 10 years. So there's going to be lots of electric vehicles, buses, all kinds of equipment out there that's going to require electricity. So our job is to kind of look at how we're going to manage all that new load. And so we're looking at demand response programs. How do we control some of the chargers so that we can leverage and efficiently use the grid so we're not having to upgrade the entire system. Other projects, we're looking at hydrogen fuel cells for like backup sources for, in our substations. It's critical that we have backup power. So if something happens to the grid, at least we have power so we can restart. So we're looking at utilizing some hydrogen fuel cells to get familiarized with that technology. And then of course, I don't want to drop the, with all this, everything's going more is communicating now. So you got all this data coming back. And so there's lots of work around, how do you get all this data and now utilize it and make useful decisions with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And that's quite a lot of projects. I mean, all of you seem incredibly busy. So I guess it's good to hear that we're not the only ones. Matt, what about you?
Well, excuse me, Joyce. So I think that, first of all, thank you for having me and letting innovation be part of this discussion today. The first thing I'd like to do is describe the Office of Innovation for the City of San Antonio. If people are not familiar with our particular department, we're based out into 4 different areas. The first one is, like what Richard was talking about, is our Smart Cities team. We've also got an R&D league, which work with our different academic institutions to try to advance different kinds of projects that would be associated with the city, and how do we improve that. One of the big critical ones that has sprung up from COVID, at least illuminating the problem, is our digital inclusion program, and really trying to tackle the digital divide. And then the last part is the unit that I work with, and that is the performance excellence team. And what we do is internal consulting for the city. And we've been involved in a lot of different engagements. Joyce, you and I got to meet each other through our CivTech SA program that we spun up a few years ago. And one of the big projects that we're working on right now is helping our newly minted workforce development office get that department off the ground, and both for the Train for Jobs program, as well as the Ready to Work program.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, definitely there's a little bit of overlap between some of the things that you all work on, but you still seem to own very much your own space within this ecosystem, which is really what this is about, right? Like, how do we build bridges from these different, I wouldn't say siloed areas, because there is a lot of collaboration that occurs. So speaking of collaboration, right? Like, what does collaboration mean, or how does it play into the ecosystem that you're in? Andy.
Yeah, so partnerships and collaboration are, I mean, I think it goes without saying that it's important to everybody here on the call today, but at Epicenter, it's actually part of our name. The EPI of Epicenter, the P in that stands for partnerships. And so that was something that we realized was an extreme value for us very early on. And so we have over 80 different strategic partners that we work with on a regular basis in various different capacities. And those types of collaborations vary just kind of depending on our relationship with the partner. But one thing that we really feel strongly about is that, we know what we do well, and we know what we don't do well. Right, and what we can rely on our partners for to kind of raise the tide for everybody. And so we kind of approach everything with that kind of mentality of, do we have to reinvent the wheel, or is there somebody else out there who we can partner with on a project to make it worth everyone's while? And so some examples of some of the partners that we work with and collaborate on a regular basis are, Z Prime obviously is a very close partner, and pretty much everyone on the panel today we partner and collaborate with in some way. So CPS Energy is obviously is one of our founding sponsors, a very close partner and collaborator, as well as the city's innovation office. Also the Electric Power Research Institute, Southwest Research Institute. There's, just a number of partners that we work with. And some of the ways that or I guess an example of some of the ways that we can work with these partners are like with Southwest Research Institute, for example, through their TMAC program, they actually provide some technical assistance to our startups. And so, that's something where we realized very early on, we're not going to be the technical experts when it comes to the innovations that our startups are bringing forward. And so instead of having to try and become those technical experts, rather we partner with somebody else who can provide that kind of support. And so we really do value collaboration and partnerships very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Matt, what about you?
Our office, collaboration is part of the DNA. We work with our 40 odd different departments internally, with all the different kind of service lines that you expect with the city, but also our external relationships, just like what Andy was talking about before. our smart cities team, being part of Smart SA. It's a collaborative approach that we have, where CPS is also one of the members of that particular group. It's vital to the work that we do because of the type of reach and services that we provide. And Geekdom is another one. Z Prime is another one. We have numbers of partners across our community that really are the fuel that we have to be able to perform.
Awesome, thank you. And Richard.
Yeah, so like Matt and Andy said, I think we're all kind of partners already, and at the end of the day, it's the same citizens here. We're all trying to help, and so those partnerships across the board are key. We view ourselves as an enabler. We provide electricity and gas to all the community, and we're out there. We have facilities out there, and it makes no sense just to not share facilities and help each other. So the partnerships across the board, I mean, we have 31 suburban cities, including the city of San Antonio, which is the largest that we work with. We have military bases here that we work with. There's lots of partnerships that we're involved with. The universities, lots of universities here. So we're really tied with the UTSA and some of the other universities to doing research projects. But also the internal collaboration is important that we want to touch on, is that we build teams across the board when we look at these pilot projects, so that across the board everybody can learn from them, and it helps develop workforce in addition to bringing new ideas to our teams.
Great, thank you so much. So while we're kind of talking about different kinds of partnerships or collaboration in general, what are the benefits of having these kinds of systems in place, right? Like it can get really easy to kind of stay in your lane, and it does take a lot of extra work to have the collaboration. So what are some of the benefits of collaborating with external partners? Richard.
So, I mean, everybody brings new ideas to the table, and sometimes those ideas can turn into new products and services for our customers. So we try not to put structures around innovation, so that we're not shutting doors, and we let people come in and you can pitch a product. And if it's something that we haven't thought of, I mean, we take interest in that, or we'll monitor progress of those new startups. There's even business models where things are mature, and then somebody comes with a different business model and says, hey, well, if we did this and this and this might help this problem that you have. And it's like, wow, okay, we didn't think about that. But I mean, that's the beauty of having different partnerships out there, and including a bunch of partnerships that everybody's trying to solve the same problems, and bringing all those ideas together just helps us with a better solution.
Couldn't agree with you more. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, partnerships are key for us. You can look at the different service lines that I talked about earlier. All our departments are dependent upon partnerships with our community. I mean, that's really kind of what community is, right? Is, a partnership of people trying to get together and work towards a common good. So in a lot of senses, I think that's exactly what the city is. And we just try to foster that.
Great, Andy.
Yeah, I love this question. And I really want to emphasize that it takes a village when it comes to innovation. You need all different kinds of parties pulling in the same direction towards the same goals. And by doing that, you're going to face a lot less resistance. And so I'd love to just give a very brief example that I think really demonstrates the positive outcomes of collaboration and working with partnerships. And Joyce, you already know this story. You're actually part of it. So one of the startups that was part of our incubator, Terra Solar, just has a great story of how the founder was able to really benefit from the innovation ecosystem, not only here in San Antonio, but regionally as well. The founder attended a 3-day startup event led by Austin Technology Incubator, our friends over there. And so through that event, she had an idea for an innovation. And so she came back to San Antonio and was wondering what the next steps were. So she connected with our friends over at Launch SA and got some early stage resources there. And they pointed her in the direction of both Geekdom and Epicenter. And so she became a member of Geekdom and was able to take advantage of some resources there. And I believe that's where she connected with you, Joyce, the first time. And then she joined our incubator program. And then at that point, she was looking to seek some funding. And, we don't personally fund, or, Epicenter does not fund our startups directly. So we were able to point her to some partners through the American Made Challenges and Texas State University, who is running a program that provided some early stage funding to help prepare her for those conversations. And ultimately, she was able to pull down some funding to help further advance her innovation. And so that's just, one example where it's just this big interconnected web. And what I love about San Antonio in particular is that we're so willing to help one another. We all want to help one another. And so even if I just approach one of our partners and say, this is a challenge that, we or one of our startups is experiencing, and I just don't even know where to go. Odds are, if they don't know where, if they don't necessarily know the answer to my question, odds are they can point me in the direction of another partner, and kind of connect those dots to get us and get our startups the help that we need. And it's a mutual process. So I just wanted to share that story because I really think it speaks to the outcomes, the potential outcomes of collaboration and partnerships.
No, absolutely it does. And thank you for sharing that. And yeah, the founder of Terra Solar actually ended up being, I think, one of the first guests that I interviewed on the Z Primes on the Grid podcast as well, which was a really great surprise and a treat for me to have this come full circle. And that's just kind of how it comes, right? Like it's so intertwined and interconnected. But I think that's what makes it fun for everybody and makes it easy to pick up the threads of collaboration and move forward. We often speak about how stakeholder partners are, collaborate, but there are really unique ways that talented individuals can participate in the programs. Can you kind of talk about talent sourcing and retainment? Because I think that is a huge element to being able to create an innovation ecosystem, is attracting talent and finding pipelines for them to feed into. So maybe Matt, you can touch on that one.
Yeah, I think it's a key part of how the city operates. When Eric Walsh became the city manager a few years ago, he provided a bit of a framework for us to operate from, focus areas, and those areas included customer service and customer satisfaction, using our resources better, using data better, and also engagement. Both on the city level, the staff level, as well as our community. And we've really taken that to heart. One of the programs that we created within the past couple of years is a program called the Innovation Academy. It's a partnership. Alamo Colleges provided us with some of the resources. We created this internal training system, and it's really it's a force multiplier that we've built within the city to help train up people to do essentially the kind of stuff that I do. And it comes back to that talent development and that retention. When a person that belongs to an organization knows that organization is really invested in that person's success, and how does it relate to the work that they do and the work that they can do, I think that's how you attract talent, and that's how you keep talent. And we've tried to use this as one example of a way for personal growth within the city, as well as to benefit the residents of our city.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Matt. And Richard, what about you guys over at CPS Energy? How do you guys, talent source and retain talent?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. I mean, one, we have what we call action-enabled strategies. And what we do is a lot of these projects that we talked about, we'll build a team around those, and those team members come from a variety of different work areas. And what's unique is all this innovation stuff is really cool, exciting stuff. So that helps retain staff, but they're also learning a lot of how the new technologies work, how to integrate them, what are the risks associated with them. So they help us build out that framework. The other way is also, working with our universities. We work real closely with UTSA. We do a lot of research projects with them. And what we found, which wasn't the intention was, hey, help us with this forward-looking research on projects that, here's some ideas that are, further out, 10 years out, and help us do some research around those. But what we found as a byproduct is, these grad students are now more interested in CPS energy. And so then they're applying over here because they understand now that energy business. So I think just the nature of getting people more involved with our type of business is exciting people when they're wanting to work for us. So it's exciting.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And Andy, what about you? How do you individually source talent or foster talent and retainment?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I should mention is that our pretty much all of our programs are run primarily virtually and have even pre-pandemic. And so, for example, with our incubator and accelerator, it's always been virtual, which is nice because it allows us to work with startups not only here in San Antonio, but in other cities, states, and increasingly even other countries as well. And part of that is, we get to see talent not only here locally, but also, talent elsewhere. And, there are times where we bring those founders and those innovators physically here to San Antonio, whether it be for meetings or, for events or other purposes. And they really get to kind of get a feel for the city and the support system that's here. And we do actually have startups that ended up opening, an office or relocating to San Antonio. And so that's one of the ways in which we are, helping to bring talent and attract talent to San Antonio. But then on the flip side of that, we're also working with partners to try and retain that talent as well. One example is we also partner with UTSA. And I, for the past few years, have participated as a mentor for their SITE program, the Center for Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship. And so I have the pleasure of working with these really talented, primarily engineering teams who are working to solve these really complex challenges. And, it's just really cool having a conversation with these young innovators and telling them about all the different resources that are available to them here in San Antonio, whether they want to continue on with their innovations and spin it out into a startup, or, whether they want to find an engineering job at a corporation here in San Antonio, right? So both options are available. And so through mentorship, you get to have these really deep conversations with them to really figure out, what are their goals? What are they hoping to achieve? And then helping to connect them with the right resources depending on what they want to do.
That's amazing. Thank you. I mean, I think it's really great that each of your organizations have found a way to tap into local talent pools or larger talent pools and work with people on the individual level, as well as with, established stakeholders and partners. I think that adds a really unique feel to how we are building innovation within our community. But there are some challenges associated with that. Andy, you had kind of mentioned a really unique challenge that was a little frustrating, or at least like a little shocking, I guess, as a result of what's been happening. So if you would please share your challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're in the energy industry, and I'm sure it comes to it's no shock to everybody that it tends to be a little more of a male-dominated field. That's not a surprise necessarily. And so for our incubation and acceleration programs, our applicants tend to skew more male. But historically, we've had about 25 to 30% of the applicants were female founded or female led companies. And so, not the statistic we want, but, it was somewhat respectable. We, however, noticed a significant decline in female applicants since the pandemic. And, when we were looking at some of the research, but behind that's been done, we've been seeing the trends that more and more women are having to leave the workforce because of the, increasing demands of family and just not having a work-life balance. And so we can't say, for sure that is why we've seen that drastic decrease in applications, but it certainly is a challenge for us since we have seen that significant decline in what was already a male-dominated field. And so that's something that is definitely on our minds, since we want representation from everybody at all levels.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think that we might not ever find out the real answer of what's going on, but it seems like more work needs to be done to either encourage or allow for the, the generation of female-led startups within that space. Because, difference of perspectives bring really great innovation. And so we want to make sure that that continues to stay open. Matt, what are some of the challenges that you've seen in terms of sourcing talent or retaining talent in our community?
I mean, COVID created a big challenge for all of us, right? And for the city, we're budget driven, and our revenues, as I know CPS saw the same thing. Our revenues dropped, and that really, it froze our ability to fill vacant positions. And it kind of intersects with the question you asked me a minute ago, Joyce, is that now that we're breaking out of this COVID challenge that we're facing, and using Zoom, for example, to learn how to operate, and it's changed the way that we approach things. It's also created tons of opportunities for us. And one of the things that it's allowed for the city to do is we're back on a path again. Our ability to perform is, like with all our different partner organizations, is improving, as we progress through this challenge of COVID. And it's created some positions. I mean, we've got positions here in the Office of Innovation. If anybody's interested, we've got a couple of positions over in our Smart Cities team right now that are available, R&D, as well as I think there will be opportunities in the digital inclusion space. So, I'm doing a little plug here, but I mean, Z Prime is
yeah, careful. You're going to get me in trouble because Jason's going to wonder if you're trying to steal me away in public.
Well, Jason's very lucky to have you, and I don't want to be poaching anybody, but like I said, it's provided some opportunities for us here, in a space where people can do something that affects the lives of over 1.5 million people, right?
Mm-hmm. No, great. Thank you. Excellent points. Richard, what about you? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing? You brought up kind of a unique challenge yourself when we were talking initially about movement of people. Would love for you to touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all see the younger generation that are getting out of school. They like to move around. So that is a challenge for, you're starting to develop and working on projects, on innovation projects, and then they kind of scoot around. But, we view that, for our management team, they're kind of like, that's a challenge, but it's also a positive for us, right? Because it kind of spreads that knowledge around the organization. We don't like people leaving our organization, but we prefer that they just move around. But in the event they do, that's the same thing. They're kind of spreading, our organization and what we're doing. Some of the other challenges, like Andy mentioned, we have the same challenges that Matt and Andy mentioned. But some of the challenges, we try and flip them, like Matt was saying with COVID, so people have to move around. So, now you can just dial up wherever you're at and do WebExes, and everybody's comfortable with it now. I think it's like, hey, why didn't we do this a long time ago? So it took COVID to get everybody to move this direction very quickly, and I think we all made it work. So those are some of the challenges that we have.
Excellent. Thank you. And I know that was a bit of a tangent and kind of a little bit of a different track from what we normally talk about when we discuss innovation ecosystems, but I think it's an important element to consider, because you can't have an innovation ecosystem without people, and people come in all different shapes and sizes from a different set of areas. And so finding ways to channel each of our talent pools into our programs or our pipelines is really important and helps keep things moving. But let's talk about the larger picture of innovation challenges and kind of where some of the struggles are for San Antonio. Andy, do you want to touch on some of those key elements for us?
Sure. So from my perspective, I think a major challenge still that I'm seeing in San Antonio, and this is going to be a challenge probably for most cities as well, but it's the issue of funding when it comes to innovation. That could be at the corporate level, corporations wanting to integrate new innovations and having set aside budget funds for that. But it's also funding in terms of investment capital for startups. I still think that while that space is and those opportunities are growing in San Antonio, we are seeing a growth in those investment resources. I still feel like it's a little bit behind the curve when compared to some other areas. However, that being, I guess one other kind of element to that as well is not only is it an issue of investment, but it's investment in areas that have a longer horizon in terms of ROI, which is where the energy sector lives specifically, which is where we spend our time. And so that, I think, too, is definitely a challenge, because the investment capital that we do have here locally is not necessarily targeted at that longer time horizon technology. And so those are some of the challenges and some areas for opportunity that I see.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Richard.
Yeah, so some of the challenges I think that we see is and the same funding as I think everybody has the the funding one of just we want to do all these nifty things and there's not enough money and resources for us to do them. So we have to prioritize. But some of the challenges when we're implementing new systems is around us that I see is the cyber side, right? So that's, we see all in the paper and everywhere, all the issues with cybercrime and cyber hackers and people doing things. And so all these new innovative platforms we're putting out there put controls and sensors and all kinds of things out there, and then it increases that as a challenge for us just to manage all those assets. The other piece is just as we push out new products and new innovative technologies, there's always that change management piece, right? That's a challenge. It's just everybody's used to their old way of doing things, and you're now changing how I do them, and that change requires work, new learning, and people have to build new skills to make sure that we take advantage of the new systems.
You bring up some very excellent points. That the layer of cyber security and risk associated with innovation, can't be overlooked. That's just got to be part of the conversation and part of the planning when we're dealing with these things, because it's foolhardy to say, oh, we're going to connect all the things, but not make sure that we've got all the doors closed before we do that. So really good points. And change management is incredibly difficult to achieve, especially as, new processes and technology gets applied all the time. You have to really stay on your toes and really make sure that communication moves through the process with you. So thank you, Richard. Matt, what about you from your perspective? What are some of the challenges?
We've got a challenge with our affordable housing here in the city. We've got a challenge with transportation. We've got a challenge with our digital divide. We've got a challenge with our socioeconomic divide here in the city of San Antonio. But the challenge for me that I think I would want to highlight is really more of an opportunity, is I don't think people understand, this is for your larger audience that may not be here in San Antonio, what a special place this is and what an opportunity that people can have here in a city to grow, to attract talent and get people to move or to relocate resources here. I've talked to somebody the other day and they were talking about, they've got experience in Silicon Valley and they've seen all these different kind of emergences of breakthrough, disruptive, innovative kind of ecosystems coming up. And they were talking about San Antonio. It's a slept on secret that people don't know about. And I think that that's the thing that, for folks that are kind of dialed into the communication that Z Prime provides. I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity here in San Antonio to build and build big. And honestly, I think if we take that path into the future, San Antonio or this area here in Texas is going to be a huge incubator of problem solving solutions. And so, yeah, challenge, but I mean, you know, it's got the opposite side of the coin of the opportunity that I think that we really present.
I think that reminds me of, something that you said when we were having our planning call with this, which was having the difference between a scarcity mindset versus an abundant one. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think it's how you kind of view it. Challenges are opportunities, right? But then you've got to figure out, okay, now how am I going to navigate through this to create a solution? And one of those kind of things is, we sometimes are overwhelmed with some of the prevailing wind that's blowing in our face, but as we navigate forward, we really start seeing that there are ways that we can build force multipliers. That, maybe we all don't need to be on one ship, and we can be on multiple ships going in the same direction. How do we try to coordinate that and get those force multipliers in place? And that's really the essence of what I think we were talking about. We view it as a scarcity, but it's a way for force amplification and being able to build synergies that can have much greater size than just the sum of their parts.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Andy, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Matt did a great job of covering it. I love that mindset comment. So nothing to add here.
Excellent. I think we have someone coming, dropping a question in the chat here. So I think it's incomplete. Madan, did you want to type your question in a little bit more fully? While we're waiting for that question to kind of come in, Richard, did you have anything that you would like to add to Matt's question or to Matt's statement?
No, I think you did a great job.
Fair enough. Okay, excellent. Well, so with that, I mean, I don't have, too many other questions. So unless we've got questions coming in from the audience, I think we'll just leave it with closing thoughts. Andy, would you like to close us out?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to kind of echo Matt's comment about San Antonio having a really strong innovation ecosystem that is continuing to grow. One thing that we have really noticed in the work that we do, since we have virtual components, to all of our programming, we have the privilege of working with a number of other different cities. And one thing we keep coming back to is just the fact that we love working with the folks here in San Antonio the most, because everybody just has the same mentality when it comes to collaboration and partnerships. And, are there areas for opportunity? Always, there's always going to be those areas, but I think we're on the right path. And I think we have a lot of the resources here that we need to get into that future state that we all envision.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Richard, your closing thoughts.
I'll echo the same thing. I mean, I think it makes innovation easy when you have willing partners across the city. And so it just makes things so much easier having universities, the city working together, Epicenter pulling in all these innovators. I'm just excited to be part of the team with our company.
Thank you. And Matt?
I want to close by my closing thought is my gratitude to you, Joyce, and Z Prime. These are the kind of events that we need to have more of. We need to have more ways for us to communicate and collaborate together. And I really applaud you, Jason, and the rest of the Z Prime team for putting together these types of venues to help facilitate that. And I hope that we can just have more, because this is where it starts. This is where it gets supported. And this is where we go forward if we can do it that way.
Well, thank you so much for that, Matt. And thank you to Richard and Andy for joining us today as well. We are very excited to have these kinds of conversations with you. And we definitely agree that there should be more. So stay tuned for City of the Future 2022 as we start planning that out. With that, I'm going to turn things over to our very own Dylan Lockwood to lead the next conversation on an IoT panel and innovation in cities. Dylan, Take it over.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Joyce. It was a great panel. Appreciated all of those insights. Now we're gonna roll right on with the City of the Future content. We're gonna be talking about connected cities. Intelligent cities are using connected devices to better serve citizens, and it lends to industrial advancements. And as more computerized infrastructure is developed, cities will increasingly rely on the networks that support digital operations. Just as we learn how the Internet of Things is changing the new frontier of city management. So we've got some great folks to talk to you folks about this, and from a lot of different angles. We're gonna go one by one and have them introduce themselves. So Phil, why don't you jump in and give a short introduction? You're muted, by the way. I believe everyone will have been automatically muted, so just be
yes, indeed. I normally notice that. Thank you. I'm Phil Beecher. I'm president and CEO of Wi-Sun Alliance. Wi-Sun is an industry alliance delivering interoperable, standards-based wireless mesh networks that can provide infrastructure, communications infrastructure for smart cities. We have a background with the utility industry, particularly in providing very large-scale, reliable mesh networks.
Thank you. And Dominic.
Thanks. Great to meet everyone. Dom Papa. I'm the vice president for the Smart State Initiatives at the Arizona Commerce Authority. So that's Arizona's economic development organization. So we run all the policy programs and initiatives for Governor Ducey here. But I also help run the Smart Region initiatives, which there are 2 in Arizona, but I also have the joy of working across all 102 cities, towns, and other unincorporated areas to help drive smarter, more sustainable cities. So excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. We also have Seth on the panel.
Yeah, Dylan, hi. Seth Henneman. So I'm a senior engineer and team lead for Smart Cities and AT&T Integrated Command Center. So my day-to-day focus is on integrating solutions for customers to, bring their cities forward from a technology perspective. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you, and thank you all for joining us today. So when we're talking about connected cities and networks and all of that good stuff, what about the current environment in cities is making the idea of a fully connected city more central to long-term planning? And Dom, I think I want to start with you on this one.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. So, especially working with cities all across Arizona, I used to work for the city of Phoenix myself before my job here. Simply to put it, the challenges and the technologies that our governments are facing are more interconnected and more complex than ever before. And that's why this idea is becoming really central to our government planning. I mean, streetlights are no longer just used for lights for, lack of a better example. The street lighting division is now the connectivity division, and actually is now also the crowd monitoring division. So these technologies are breaking down silos internally to cities and also enabling departments to start to pull data and analytics from across multiple systems and sensors, really, to enable them to make these more data informed decisions on the services that affect our daily lives. And so that's why it's becoming so central to planning, is simply because of the complexity and the interconnectedness of both the technology, but also the challenges.
And yes, so Phil, how are networks changing, and how can cities help take advantage of those?
Well, I think Dom summed it up quite well there, in that networks, I would say early smart city networks tended to be supporting particular application silos. And I think as the technology evolves, so networks become multi-service networks capable of supporting a range of different applications. And where this becomes really important is you're opening up new application areas where you can share data from one application to another. So not just in terms of the network infrastructure providing a common carrier, but allowing for data to be shared, say between street lighting or population management, the ability to do things like dynamically adjust street lights when there are people on bicycles going past, which is something that happens in Europe. I think another thing that Dom picked up on, which is really interesting, is the breaking down of the silos between different departments within a municipality. So the network has probably had the capability for a long time, but previously I would think that departments were very focused on their own issues, their own problems. So overcoming that becomes, I would say, a critical thing for municipalities to achieve.
And Seth, is what other aspects of the modern landscape are making connected cities a more of a viable reality?
Yeah, I think there's a few things like Phil and Dom mentioned as far as like, organizational boundaries being crossed and things like that. I think generally speaking, city leaders want better awareness of what's going on in their city. I mean, that's what I communicate back and forth with a lot with city leaders is there's just no reason anymore. I mean, take your house. I mean, you hear all the time about things you can buy for your house, like connected thermostats and Ring doorbells and stuff like that. And I think people, when they live that stuff, that they take that to their job. And for city leaders, it's like, why can't we do this on a macro scale across the entire city? And if I could see this stuff in action, and if we could do this, I think it would help our operations and it would make us more secure. It would save us money potentially on manpower or cost savings or energy or things like that. So I think technology is just a driver for that in a big way. And I think city leaders are finally starting to really kind of learn that.
That makes sense. So Dom, what are some of the technologies that you've watched closely at ACA?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And let me that Seth just made, and I just want to kind of go back to that technology is making us smarter. The reason why, the challenges we're facing is the interconnectedness of the challenges and the interconnectedness of technology. But to Seth's point, the technologies are actually making us smarter on, what we do as cities and how we deliver these services. It just literally makes me remember a use case that we were just speaking about not too long ago. But these technologies are helping us where we locate infrastructure and services. So this use case was, there was a downtown that literally used to hire people to stand on the side of the road and count the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists, where were skateboarders moving to, where were people congregating. They would hire an individual person to stand there on the street for the entire day and count these. And that's how they would base where they were placing their infrastructure, how they were delivering their services. They would use accounts to understand all of that kind of infrastructure deployment. So to Seth's point, it's right. We can now leverage sensors and technologies such as LiDAR, for example, to really better understand how people are interacting and using our built environment and really better help us manage our cities, to his point. And just to paint one more example of how the technologies in what we're thinking about in Arizona, for example, we have a major issue around heat and heat-related deaths. So LiDAR, for example, is just top of mind because we've been using it a lot. It can actually tell us when an individual, maybe a homeless individual, falls to the ground and doesn't get up for an extended period of time, which we can then proactively send emergency services to. And so, again, it's just what Seth said, I just thought was brilliant. It's making us smarter and helping us manage our cities and our infrastructure in smarter ways. That's what kind of these technologies are enabling us to do.
Yeah, and that homeless population is a big focus that I've heard from customers. There's another one that building on that, Tom, where folks are looking to use things like video analytics to detect homeless shelters and things like that, and homeless populations count. And then they utilize that information potentially to report it back to the likes of housing and urban development, which provides extra funding based on that. So a lot of cities don't have accurate counts of homeless population because it's so hard to get, because people are having to go out and count, like you just said. And so having technology be able to provide that, get more accurate counts, which gets better funding for cities to handle the situation, get people what the help they need is, I mean, these are some of the drivers that I'm hearing about too.
Phil, have you heard of any particular use cases for IoT expanding a city's capabilities?
Oh, I think there are many. That's really interesting, the homeless, because I haven't come across that one before. I mean, there are application areas, and I think going back to Dom's point about street lighting is a very easy to justify use case for a city to deploy IoT. So a good starting point. The business case for providing LED lighting and then providing management and control allows you to reduce maintenance costs and also reduce the electricity costs of lighting, which is particularly important in some European cities where the price of power is quite high. But then that opens the door for connection of other devices. We're seeing in London, for example, they are adding sensors to look at traffic flow and pollution monitoring, and you know, a number of places that have been dedicated to cars which are heavily polluted. It allows you to analyze, could this become a pedestrian zone? And there are examples where certain parts of the city which have been, you know, no-go areas for pedestrians are now opening up with bars and restaurants and reducing the amount of traffic. So I think the ability to have multiple different types of sensors all connected into the same network, and then for the city to be able to have this view onto what's going on everywhere is really important, I would say. There is another interesting use case in London where there are sensors connected to the life belts along the River Thames. So that serves two purposes. One, if a life belt is removed, then maybe it's been stolen, so they can go and replace it, or maybe it's been thrown into the Thames to rescue somebody who's gone in. So it provides that early detection and allows the municipality to maintain its services.
Those are great. And I love all these use cases because they get me inspired. And I know there's a lot of cities listening. So and maybe just to touch on one more, because Dylan, I love this question about how does it expand the capability of the cities, or how does it break down the silos between departments to allow for more efficient services? So we did a use case here too, where a city was was fitting their trash and recycling trucks with cameras. And the initial use case was to look for individuals that were sleeping in alleys, because they would sleep and they would, you know, be hidden by shrubbery or objects, and oftentimes they would get injured by the trucks driving down the alleys. So they were initially using artificial intelligence to try to spot individuals that might be laying down, and then obviously proactively warn the driver of the truck. But then the city said, wait, that camera can also actively spot graffiti through artificial intelligence, and then proactively tell our graffiti abatement team that there's graffiti on this wall or, you know, this building, and they can send out an abatement team before having to be called or someone having to report it through 311. So it went from a waste management project to then a community development and community engagement project through the economic development department. So again, one use case actually inspiring a couple of different city departments. I love this idea of creating that capability across cities, departments.
Yeah, and there are you know, even more ways that you know, that they can be utilized for you know, not just public safety in regards to, you know, that kind of thing, but in terms of like, you know, flooding and resource availability, and even stuff like parking. I've heard different kinds of use cases for. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the edge cases. Like, so Seth, let's start with you. What role does sort of edge intelligence play in the connected city? How centralized is all of this, or will it become?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because, like, the way back in the day, data was always really mostly processed in customer data centers. Everyone built their own data center. And then, fast forward 10 years into the future from that, and there was this mass exodus of on-prem data centers into cloud service providers, the likes of Amazon, Google, Azure. So people are trying to run their intelligence and their applications, including IoT, in the cloud. And over the last few years, what you've seen is that it doesn't make sense to centralize everything anymore, because there are some app operations and analytics and sensor data feeds that operate faster and more securely if you keep them on the edge. So what we're seeing now is this paradigm shift back to somewhat to the edge with some of these select IoT use cases. Video is probably number one on that list because it's so bandwidth intensive on networks. And one of the limiting factors for all of this is network. As anyone that deals with IoT knows, is the sensor is great, but if it doesn't have a network to communicate its information back somewhere, it's useless, right? So the network is the most important thing that a sensor has to rely on. And in order to protect that network, there's some payloads that need to be shifted to the edge. Video is one of those. And so that's kind of where I see everything starting with customers is moving that. But I think there's going to be other things behind it, like the machine learning algorithms that are process intensive and things like that.
So if I could ride on the back of that, there are other applications as well where obviously with an AT&T network, it's very rare you're going to get network failure. But there are certain use cases where if you certainly in utility, where if you have a power outage, for example, you can use edge computing and local computing power to help reorganize the power grid network to reduce and mitigate the effects of that network outage. So I would say, those utility use cases, volt var management is another one where where you can take data from smart meters and process it locally to reduce voltage and hence power losses on the transmission lines.
Have you heard about any of these kind of useful edge intelligence ideas in Arizona, Dom?
Yeah, I think Seth and Phil are way more knowledgeable at this topic. I'm not technically as savvy, but I will know in our conversations on autonomous vehicle, everyone seems to be talking about the importance of edge. You can't wait for the data to go back to the data center and come back to the street light if it's dynamically changing lights for autonomous vehicles and communicating. So mobility seems to be a very big focus of ours, especially when we're talking about the importance of edge within cities.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say another two things that come to mind are augmented reality and virtual reality. Those are two technologies that aren't hugely mainstream yet, especially for things like city operations. They're more citizen engagement type stuff, but you're going to see that over the coming 5 years or so. And being able to process that data on the edge is going to be key. It won't work if you have to send it to a centralized cloud.
Right. And AR, VR will be used for smart cities in what way?
Well, probably first is mostly going to be citizen engagement. So pointing you to places that you're trying to get to. Think like augmented reality tours of major city attractions, things like that you can do without having to visit a museum or something like that in person. But these things are going to be enabled by faster networks, and they're going to be enabled by that edge processing component that you talked about, for sure.
That's it. That's interesting. I would say we just to do a short plug. You know, at Z-Prime we have an AR VR development team, Frolic, and we actually have put out a couple of apps for cities, to mostly to explain about how to electrify things, and one about pollution, about urban development while keeping pollution in mind, so environmentally minded pollution. So yeah, I think that's how you said it's sort of going to start, and it'll be interesting to see how that sort of develops. But you know, one thing we gotta eat our veggies here when it comes to IoT, when it comes to analytics and all this, you know, data-driven innovation. We have to talk about security and privacy. So Phil, I want to start with you. How do these issues of you know, data security and data privacy affect the planning and implementation processes?
Well, I think hopefully everyone will agree that security by design is the right approach to this. You start considering security at Wysun Alliance, along with the telecom industry. We regard the security of the devices, starting at authentication of devices, joining a network, which, you know, for cellular industry has always been there in terms of SIM connectivity. It's not always the case with all IoT technologies, however. So authenticating devices onto the network, ensuring that communications is encrypted and secure, you know, protecting against things like man in the middle of attacks, making sure that there's end-to-end security. And then the problem becomes that for the municipality and the management of that data. So I think that's key. So my view is reduce the opportunities for human mistakes in all of this. Provide electronic mechanisms by design as much as you possibly can. That would be my view.
So yeah, so Dom, from the, you know, from your perspective, when you're, you know, looking at a new technology or undertaking a new project, how do you go about incorporating those key factors, security factors and privacy factors into the planning process holistically?
Yeah, you know, I think Phil hit it on the head. Security by design, privacy by design are two key characteristics that we try to preach with all of our communities as they're looking towards projects. But maybe to build on that, what we also highly, highly recommend and actually help facilitate is collaboration. I think the previous group talked a lot about the need for collaboration in smart cities. We actively not only suggest, recommend, again, facilitate that the cities, the CIOs, whoever's running the project, go talk to the university experts in security, go talk to the industry partners that we have around the table in our smart region initiatives, go talk to these experts about the security concerns that they might have, because they might be thinking about something you're not thinking about as a CIO of a city for 40 years, right? And so go talk to other people and try to understand maybe some of the questions, concerns that you're not thinking about, because I think that's the worst thing possible, is to just build these solutions in a siloed vacuum without understanding maybe some of the complexities that you just might not know of, simply due to the fact that these technologies are developing at such an increasing rate. So yeah, we just actively highly introduce our cities to industry partners like AT&T, but also university partners as well. Lean on all the experts you possibly can.
Yeah, are there like codified like processes or checklists when you're starting a new project, and so that, you know, you're going at it from all angles, or is it more of an organic process than that?
it's still a little bit organic. We've started to create what we're calling playbooks or blueprint templates that these cities can kind of pass through their own organization. So that way they know each time they're starting a project, are we thinking about X? Are we thinking about Y? Have we talked to, Z? And so unfortunately not yet, but hey, if anyone's out there wanting to help us write playbooks and blueprints, we'd love to do that.
Awesome. So Seth, I'll pass it to you as the last word on security and data privacy. Are there any good words of advice you have for people on the development side, like you guys at AT&T, for how to think about the design aspect of it?
Yeah. So cybersecurity it's like one of those, it's like having a good accountant or attorney or something when you need them. It's something you definitely want to have. And I'm talking from both sides. So from a customer side and from, we'll call it like a systems integrator side. And it's important that both sides are educated. So, if you're not, if you're, let's say, a sensor vendor, most sensor vendors, that OEMs that create these sensors that cities deploy, not all of them are security minded. They build a product that's really good at something, but they're not necessarily thinking about the cybersecurity behind it. And it's not their fault. It's just that, they're building this to fill a function. And so it's important that the people that are, responsible for deploying this are understanding what those security parameters are. And as sort of an integrator of some of these solutions like AT&T is, we have a set of standards and certifications that we send folks through, and they map back to a bunch of boring security controls that I'm not going to go over here, but there are things like DoD NIST controls and things like that, like FIPS certification. There's a whole bunch of them. But if you have an organization or even a single person, if you're a small shop that understands those and has some cycles to read into them, it's so important, because at the end of the day, you really have to be able to pass the red face test, that you actually know what you're putting out into your cities. So
thank you for that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, and all of this, I mean, obviously it's really important, because the more IoT deployed in a city, the more the reliance on the city, and it becomes part of the critical infrastructure. So that security by design is absolutely critical to all of this.
It's very true. Okay, so we've got only got a couple minutes left. So last minute question, or not last minute, although it is last minute. A last question 1 minute per person about how do everyday citizens benefit from a city that invests in IoT and digital services? And what I mean by that is, because we've talked about specific use cases and how, we can use, smart street lighting to, improve visibility, save energy, but also help with safety and that kind of stuff. But I'm talking kind of more from if your city has this philosophy in mind of how they're going, that they want to be a connected city and make these kind of data-driven development decisions going forward. What does that mean for me, average citizen? And I'll start with you, Phil.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, really good question. So I think, as you said, we've touched on various use cases that bring particular benefits in different areas, but generally, a connected city, if it's done right, is going to improve the quality of life for all of the visitors and residents of the city, by improved public safety, by just general things like managing traffic flow, managing parking. So you're improving convenience. There's going to be improving public transportation as well, is another area here, reducing pollution. And we haven't even really touched on the health aspects, sort of general health monitoring and well-being applications that are out there. So I think from those points of view, another area we haven't even touched on is renewables and the ability to integrate renewables into the general electricity supply. So loads of areas. I'm sure I've missed plenty, but that's for Dom and Seth to pick up.
Yeah, Seth, how do you see it?
So I got two quick answers. My first is going to be time. Time is like the one resource people don't get back. You only have a limited amount of it. So, it's a simple answer, but being able to do things more efficiently so we have more time in our lives as we have busy lives with kids and schools and work and stuff like that. The second answer is just that it's the direction. I mean, when you live in a city, you think of it like your favorite sports team or whatever. You're part of kind of that hive, if you want to call it, and you want to see your city thrive. So you like to see that technology, and it's going to become more important, especially for the following generations, like our kids, because they're plugged into technology more than we are. The Gen Zers of the world and things like that. So they're going to want to see this, and those are going to be the cities that thrive in the future. You're going to see those generations moving into cities that utilize technology more. And so at the end of the day, it's an investment that's going to pay off for sure.
Thank you. And Dom.
Oh, this question's tough to go third. They they both nailed it. I mean, ultimately, high level, the cities that do invest in this, those are the cities where you're going to want to live, work, and learn, right? They're going to be creating these more livable environments because they're going to have the infrastructure that's going to be necessary to adapt and be more agile in order to solve the challenges that come at us that we might not be expecting. I mean, think about COVID and what it's done to completely reshape the communities, our neighborhoods, our cities, right? The cities that invest in the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure, will be able to adapt to these ever-changing environments in ways that other cities that won't be able to. And to Seth's point, citizens will vote with their feet or will choose with their feet, and they'll just move to places that do invest because they'll have better, higher quality of life. So well done, both of you.
Yeah, and as you guys mentioned, there's so many more use cases to delve into, so many more aspects to analyze, and as more and more cities take on these kinds of projects, it'll be really interesting to see how that works out and what lessons we can learn along the way. So I just want to thank you all for being here on this panel, sharing your expertise with our audience, and we hope to see you all again in future events, because I loved having you on. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Joyce to close out the conference. Thanks to all our attendees for joining the panel. Go ahead, Joyce.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dylan. And thank you all for participating today. I think we had some really fruitful conversations around innovation, security, IoT, and so much more. Please stay tuned for next month's City of the Future. It's going to be December 15th. We're going to be covering the future of mobility, infrastructure, and urban design. A huge thank you to our sponsors and participants. We couldn't do this without you, and a huge shout out to the Z Prime team for making all of this possible. With that, everybody have a really safe and happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you all next month.